we go. We should be up live now. I usually wait just a minute or two to let some people hop on. Uh-oh, the flag fell down.
My flag fell down. Well, I got it taped up in a room that's, it's not normally in, and there's air blowing through.
Looks good, sir. All right, I just want to share this out on one of the pages. So just a moment. Make sure it's up. All right, looks like we are up. I will share this to the Meet the Masters group. And we're live. It says Grandmaster Strong's down here with us. So hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
All right, so we are live with Master Kevin Robinson. It's been an honor for me to have Master Robinson here. I know, sorry, I'm getting an echo. Turn my volume down on here. Anyway, it is an honor for me to be interviewing Master Robinson today. He's, to me, a personal role model and kind of the definition to me of what a martial artist should be, both in his toughness and his skills, as well as in just his kindness and humility. So just want to thank you, sir. If you want to say hi to everybody before we officially get started.
Well, before I say hello, thanks for the very kind words. I really appreciate that. It's an honor to be here. Hello, everybody. It's my honor to take this time to talk to everyone.
Thank you, sir. All right, so I'd just like to get started. It's kind of the same way we do with everybody. If you could talk a little bit, I know there's some extensive history, but a little bit about how and kind of when you got started in the martial arts and then in the World Tang Soo Do Association more specifically.
Sure. So I took my very first Tang Soo Do class in July 1976. I was 12 years old. I was in the backyard on West Street. It was a 2.5-hour class in the hot, humid sun. My brother-in-law was a student of Frank Trajanowicz. I was a big fan of the TV series Kung Fu. He knew that. I went to him and said, hey, I want to learn Kung Fu. He goes, well, I don't know anything about Kung Fu, but I'm taking karate with this master in Scranton who's famous. And I'm like, well, sure, I'll learn karate. So he started teaching me Tang Soo Do. And my first class was 2.5 hours. I trained with him for about 3 months. And then unfortunately, him and my sister separated, and I wasn't allowed to ever see him again. But in that 3 months when I trained with him, every class was 2.5 hours. And he had taught me all the basic blocks, all the basic kicks in the first 3 forms. And I think 5, 5, 5 of the 1-steps. And then I was forbidden to see him. I was forbidden to train. And around 1979, 3 students of Master Jorgensen, ironically, started an adult education class in Tunkhannock at the 5th grade building. And I asked my mom if I could go, and she's like, no, you're not allowed to go. If your dad found out, blah, blah, blah. I kept begging her, and she let me go. So that's history. Once I got into that class, I took that class. That was it. I said, this is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. Yeah. And ironically, the people that ran that class were not the lady, Lucy, she was a 2nd degree black belt, and the 2 gentlemen were both Chodan Bows. They were, back then, the old belt system, they were red belts with 2 white stripes and a black stripe. And they didn't get their black belts for 6 to 9 months after that class started. But that's how my history went. By the time by 1981, I was a junior in high school. I was teaching at the studio almost every night because the instructors started fighting amongst themselves. And the senior GUP students didn't want to teach class. And they're like, well, who's going to teach? I said, well, I've always had this overinflated sense of responsibility. I felt like somebody had to teach class. So I started teaching class. I was actually a 4th GUP green belt. Back then, the belt system was white, orange, green. You had to have 2 stripes on your green belt. Then you went to red, 3 stripes on your red belt. And then you went to midnight blue, which is now black. So yeah, I was a 4th GUP green belt at that time teaching.
Wow. So your experience does predate World Tang Soo Do Association. Do you have any memories of the association starting back in 1982?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because we were kind of kept in the dark where I live. I live in a very small town. And even though the guys that had the studio weren't there teaching, they still were very controlling on everything. So when we knew there was going to be this charter convention, I was really excited, like, oh, I'm going to get to go and train and meet Grandmaster Shin and all these masters. And the guy that owned the studio goes, no. He said it's only for black belts and masters. Chodan bows are not allowed to go. So we didn't know that that wasn't the truth. So we just assumed, okay, we can't go. So I was not at the charter convention, even though I was still part of Grandmaster Shin's group. Because if you look at all my certificates, from orange belt all the way to 7th Dan, his signature's on everything. He was actually the one that signed my U.S. Tong Soo Do Federation certificates for all my GUP certificates. So I actually got to meet him in 1983 when I tested for my first degree black belt down at headquarters. That's when I actually got to meet Grandmaster Shin. So that was an experience. That test was wild because I'd never met, with the exception of Master Kwan, who came to Tunkhannock once to give my Chodan bow test in 1982. I had never met a master. And, you know, now I'm down there in front of all these masters. It was quite the experience.
Yes, sir. And I remember even when I started years later, just high-ranking black belts and masters weren't something you saw everywhere. So.
Oh, yeah. They were very rare. And you have to remember, back in 1983, when they gave black belt tests, the masters did not wear dobaks. They came in street clothes. And that was the first time I ever saw my favorite master, the guy I try to emulate, Master Stephen Chambliss, because I'll never forget it. You know, we're all sitting up at headquarters. It's hot. There's like 70 of us in this room. Tests back then were very small. And that was people going for first, second, third, and master rank at the time. And, you know, there's a couple Koreans up front, and James Lee, Master James Lee was up front. And all of a sudden it gets quiet. I hear people whispering. They're like, oh, Master Chen was your master. Now, I'd never heard of him before. Because, again, we were kept very sheltered. We heard of Grandmaster Shin, Master Kwan, Master Yi. But we didn't hear about a lot of the Americans. So I'll never forget. He comes walking in. And at that point, in 1983, Master Chambliss was ripped. I mean, he came strutting in. He had on a pair of Adidas sweatpants with the 3 stripes down the side. He had on this skin-tight polo shirt, and his arms were huge. His chest was huge. And he comes walking in, and somebody that was an observer goes, he beat the world champion. He is the baddest guy. And I'm looking at him, and I realized he had earrings in his ear. And I had never seen him. I'm from a small town in the country, a farming community. I had never seen a man with earrings in his ear. And I'm like, wow, this must be the toughest guy on the planet. Not only is he a phenomenal karate guy from what I'm hearing, and he's big and muscular, he's wearing earrings. He's got to be tough because he must be fighting all the time. That's how goofy. That's how out of the loop of society we were coming from this small town. We didn't know that men wore earrings, you know, in the city. It was pretty funny.
That's a great story. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I was terrified of him. Still am.
Yes, sir. So going on a little bit later, can you talk a little bit about how your school, how Robinson's Martial Arts, how you started your school and kind of what it's grown to be?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, I was teaching almost full time from 1981 on, and training with Grandmaster Shin all that time. In 1985, I tested for my second degree. In 86, he started the Region 8 Instructors Club, late 85, early 86. And I was going down and training with him along with the guy that owned the studio, but he wasn't going as often. And at that time, I was running the studio full time. And I was still paying dues, but I was running the studio. And this guy was talking to another Korean master who had left the association to start his own. And that was very upsetting to me. And I said, Grandmaster Shin, I just want you to be aware that I'm loyal to World Tong Soo Do and you, and the owner of the studio is talking to somebody else. Well, you know, Grandmaster Shin in his wisdom goes, well, I don't know what the truth is. You keep coming and training with me, go back, teach, whatever. So, okay. So July 1988, the owner of the school comes in, he says, I got a phone call from Grandmaster Shin, and he told me that you told him that I'm talking to so-and-so, and he threw me out of the studio. So I wasn't allowed to teach anymore. And that's all I'd ever done. So I was like, oh man. So I called Grandmaster Shin. Grandmaster Shin goes, don't worry about it. He says, the truth will always show itself. You just keep coming and training with me, and he'll show his true colors. Well, in November, he showed his true colors and left the association. And Grandmaster Shin announced at the Region 8 instructors dinner that year that I was going to open a studio, that the other guy was gone. And I was like, sir, I'm more than happy to open a studio. I just don't know, what do you want me to call it? I can't call it Tunkhannock Karate anymore, because that was the original name of the studio we had. He goes, you're going to call it Robinson's. And I'm like, I'm going to call it Robinson's what? He goes, it doesn't matter. He said, but you're going to call it Robinson's. He says, it's your small town. Everyone knows you. You've been doing this a long time. You open a school and you bury him. And I said, I'll do my best. And I opened the studio, had 15 students. I had $500 for the first month's rent, 15 students and a dream, and started from there and gradually built the studio up. You have to understand, in my hometown, there's 1,700 people, very small town, farming community. In the county I live in, there's 22,000 people, so it's small. In Tunkhannock at that time, there were 3 other karate schools, martial arts studios. There was Pan American Tong Soo, there was a Kempo school, there was an American freestyle school, and then there was me. And then once I opened up, another guy came in to town and opened up a little homemade thing. So I just like plugged away, did what I was told to do, just taught my classes with passion and intensity. And one school would shut down, and then another school would shut down. And then the original guy I taught for got arrested and his school shut down. So I waited about 9 months, and then I took over that space because it was much bigger than where I was teaching. And then we just really grew from there. And, just kind of went from there. I just kept training with Grandmaster Shin and studying and learning and teaching. I teach every class every night, always have, I always will. And one day I was up in my studio, it was on the 2nd floor, and I'm looking down at this building across the street that's for sale. And it was a lot of money. It's one of the bigger buildings in the town. And I looked up at the sky. I said, God, if you would give me that building, I would really take this as far as I could and really try to honor you and the association even more. And, I called the realtor. They're like, this is what we want. And I'm like, I can't touch that. So I kept praying about it. And then about 9 months later, I called again and the price went down, but it was still way too much. So kept praying about it. 6 months later, I called, got to talk to the guy. We negotiated. I got the price I could afford. And then the bank came in to inspect it, and there was a little spot of oil on the ground and back. And they said there had to be an environmental inspection. And I said, for what? They said, well, there's oil on top of the ground. I'm like, I want you to think for a minute. Oil's heavy. If there's an underground oil tank and it's leaking, it's not coming to the top. Obviously, when the person filled the oil tank, they got a little on the ground. Well, we have to have an environmental inspection. And the guy that owned the building wouldn't pay for it. And I said, well, I can't afford to do that. So deal's off. About 4 months later go by and the realtor calls and goes, oh, Mr. So-and-so really likes you. He wants you to have the building, but he got another offer. We're just calling to give you another chance. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't. He didn't want to do the environmental inspection. I can't afford that. And not only that, if he really had somebody else on the line, he wouldn't be calling me. He would just sell the building. So 4 months more go by and I call and say, okay, I'd like to buy that building. And they're like, okay, blah, blah, blah. And then they wanted to do it for the original price. And I said, whoa, I can't do it for that price anymore. I said, because I've been sitting over here for another year and a half. My business hasn't grown. I said, I can only offer you this now. And they're like, no, it's got to be this. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. So we met in the middle and I got the building. And then from there, I just grew it. And it's amazing how blessed our studio is. I mean, we've trained, I don't know, thousands of people, believe it or not, in that little town. And we've got 31 grand champions, not just in World Tong Soo Do, but open tournaments. Grandmaster Shin was up. He paid my school a tremendous compliment, which I was very thankful for. And he told me how he would do it, how he thought I should do it, as far as the structured building goes. So I took his advice in 2008 and I ripped out the entire front of the building. So now it's all like this big open, because we used to train in back, and the front was like a warm-up area, and there was big dressing rooms, and there was a weight room. And I just ripped all that out and made the main training floor right in front when people walk by and they can see.
Sure.
We've been very fortunate.
Thank you for sharing, sir. Great stories there. We have a lot of people out there watching. I will try to get to your comments and questions too, but you have over 30 people out there watching you, sir, consistently.
Oh, nice.
Right now. So, like I said, we'll try to get to your comments. Some of them kind of fold into some of the things I already want to talk to Master Robinson about. So be patient and we will get there. Just want to continue on something that's been pretty big for me to remember about you personally. I was at Region 8 Black Belt Camp back in the day when the first Snickers Bar Black Belt speech was given, and then again later the Snickers Bar Master speech at Master's Clinic. So for anyone who hasn't heard that story, I know you can't do the entire speech, but if you can kind of just sum up kind of what that is and where it came from.
Yeah, I wish I knew. It's funny thing about that speech, when Grandmaster Shin asked me to talk, I was like, yes, sir. I didn't want to tell him no. But I believe that was Albright University that speech was done at.
Yes, sir.
And, you have to understand, I'm an introvert by nature, unless I'm talking about something I'm passionate about, like martial arts. But when I went to college, I had a speech class with 15 people in it. And I actually dropped the course because I didn't want to stand in front of 15 people and give a speech. So I'm like, okay, Grandmaster Shin. And I stood up that night and I had an idea about Snicker bars, but I don't write speeches out. I believe that, for me personally, it's fake. It's disingenuine. I like to speak from my heart and thoughts I have in my head, spur of the moment. I'll take ideas and put them on paper, but I won't prepare a speech other than to think about it for a week or two before. So I got up there and I'm standing in front of 500 people and I'm like, oh crap. So I'm trying to go through it. But the gist of the speech was, what's the slogan of Snicker Bar? It's so satisfying. And I remember the commercials of the people rock climbing and they get halfway up the rock ledge and they're exhausted and they've got to stop and bite into that Snicker bar. And then they get the energy to continue going. And they were satisfied. And I took it from, being satisfied isn't a good thing. Like as a Snicker Bar black belt, are you satisfied? And if you are satisfied, what does that really mean? So let's look at satisfaction. So if you're, we train so hard to become black belts. And then you reach that goal, if you're satisfied, then you stop pushing yourself. You don't train as hard. You stop seeking out more knowledge and information. You stop trying new ways to get better, be it your stretching routine, your nutrition. So you don't want to be satisfied. That's kind of where, and I honestly wish I knew what I said at the black belt camp. But again, I don't write stuff out. The one thing I remember was the first black belt camp I was ever at where the speaker got a standing ovation. And that was like, oh my gosh, I got a standing ovation. And Grandmaster Shin said to me that day, he goes, you need to say this at the Master's Clinic. And I was like, oh, someday I will, sir. But, because I find a lot of the senior masters very intimidating. And, some of the stuff I said in that speech, you can take it as a motivating thing or you can take it as an insult. And it's not meant to be insulting. It's meant to provoke thought. Because the saddest thing you see in martial arts are people that train so hard. They're so dedicated. They're so loyal in many organizations. And they get that master's rank and then they just all they do is teach. They don't train anymore. They don't really try to grow their business. They get kind of an attitude. So I gave the speech at the Master's Clinic. And again, first time in a Master's Clinic, I got a standing ovation, which was cool. But I'll never forget, I had 4 or 5 masters come up to me after the speech in private and say to me, Master Robinson, I really loved your speech. It was awesome. You said everything I've been wanting to say for years. And the beauty of it is now everybody's going to be mad at you and I'm okay. And I was like, what's there to be mad about? It was supposed to be inspirational and motivational and to get people to think, you know, they still have a lot of value. They still have a lot of stuff to give. Don't be satisfied. Keep pushing yourself. And yeah, it is what it is. I don't know if that's what you were looking for. I really can't tell you what I said because I'm sure each speech was a little bit different. I think the master speech was more toward personal growth and your business and growing the association. We should never be satisfied. We should want to grow this beautiful organization and this art that is giving some of us a purpose in life. You know, and that's what it was really about.
I appreciate that again. I agree. Absolutely. And I do find it motivating. I understand how some people might get the wrong message, but no, I got your message, sir. And I agree that we can't be satisfied. We keep on moving. So
well, I appreciate it. It was never meant to be insulting or put down on anybody. It was meant to motivate and inspire people because this organization is unbelievably loaded with talent, knowledge, just it's the most incredible group of people I've ever met in my life. And I travel a lot. So it's an impressive group.
So that's a good segue. Let's talk a little bit about that. I know in our pre-meeting, I talked to you a little bit about that, but yeah. I remember years ago, one time just sitting in a group of masters and Master Robinson had mentioned that he didn't particularly care for traveling, but in the later years with Grandmaster Shin, you had promised Grandmaster Shin that you would travel and you would teach around the world. And pretty much ever since then, you've been doing that. So if you talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's not that I love traveling. My problem was I didn't like flying.
Yes, sir.
I don't like to fly. So I had said to Grandmaster Shin, when my daughter graduates from high school, I will fly all over the world and serve you in this association. I said, but until then, I'll just drive everywhere. So, or take a train. So, you know, I have taught Tong Soo in 41, 42 states. Now I realize we don't have World Tong Soo in every state. However, if I teach for another organization, if it's a Japanese, an Okinawan, a Filipino, whatever group wants me to come and teach, I go as a representative of World Tong Soo. I teach World Tong Soo. I talk about World Tong Soo. So yeah, and then, you know, I did travel with him right when my daughter was graduating. Him and I took a trip together, which was an adventure. Fun. And I've traveled all over the world. I've been to quite a few countries teaching World Tong Soo, and it's my obligation. It's my honor. It's my privilege, and I'm obligated because World Tong Soo gave me a passion, a purpose, a profession, and a life. And it's something I will teach and do until they nail me in the box. You know, people always say, well, you know, what happens if you end up in a wheelchair? I'll say, well, my mouth hopefully will still work and I can still teach. Just because I physically can't do it doesn't mean I still can't communicate it and, you know, share. So it's just what I do. It's what I love. There's nothing in life that's held my interest. There's nothing in life I've been more passionate about than martial arts and World Tong Soo. Nothing. I mean, it's the most beautiful thing with the most beautiful people on the planet. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in the organization. I've traveled around the world. I've traveled all around the United States. I've been with other groups, not knocking any group, but this organization has absolutely hands down the most talented. Every organization has talent. Every martial arts system has incredible talent, but you might get a group of people, maybe 20 or 30 that are super talented and the rest are just there. This organization, I mean, the talent pool and the knowledge and the technical ability is just off the charts. And I just can't say enough about it. And that's why I'll never leave it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Um, so in addition to obviously being World Tongue Steel Association master, teacher, you're also an author. I've been fortunate enough to read the Smart Self-Defense book, have a copy of that, as well as your more recent book, Rising Above. If you can kind of share a little bit about maybe the inspiration and process behind writing those books and kind of what that has meant to you.
Uh, I'm a student of life. I I'm a self learner. I'm not big on formal education, just because I've had students that were going for their doctorate. I mean, there's certainly a purpose for formal education. Nothing wrong with that. But several of my students that were going for their doctorates would say to me, you know, Master Robinson, the higher degrees I get, the more they kind of shrink my thinking. They don't expand my thinking. They want us to think more in a box. And that's not my personality. I want to know the hows, the whys, all the angles. So, you know, in my life, I'm just constantly studying. I study about 3 hours a day of something. Um, and I just want to share that information. Like self-defense for some people is a real puzzle. Well, it's not really complicated. So I wanted to write a simple book that anybody could read and understand and give them like some, you know, tips. It's not about a technique because technique doesn't mean much. It's about these are the things you can hit with, these are the spots you can hit multiple times. You know, the mindset, the understanding that a lot of times we get in bad situations because of our ego and we have to argue and get our point. And I don't argue with anybody over anything really. It's like everybody's got an opinion. It's coming from their perception and their perspective, and I can respect that. But in today's world, you know, violence is a little more, especially in America, violence is a little more random. You got to be prepared for that. And there is no, okay, this guy's going to choke you, do this technique or this technique. There are techniques that work well, but if it got to the point where he got his hands on you, that means you failed in controlling your ego. You didn't walk away. You didn't run away. You didn't do, you know, you got into this contest of, you know, escalation instead of de-escalation. So that's what that book was about. The Rising Above was just, I was actually writing 3 books simultaneously. I was writing a book about my life because I had several people that I met over the years go, man, you should write a story on your life. It is incredible. You could help so many people. And I'm like, yeah. So I was writing a book on that. And then I was writing a book on, it was called The Lies We're Told. And then I was writing a book on, it was actually a kind of a Christian book. And I was like, you know what, why don't I just combine all these into one thing? Because I don't find myself that interesting. So I'll just put a little bit of my life in there. And then I'll put these lies that were told in there and put the facts, you know, as I see them in there. And then in the end, I'll just write a little bit about God because a lot of people have questions about God and we struggle with, you know, all kinds of stuff. So I did that and published it. I was just writing for fun. I have since rewritten both books. I actually in January rewrote Rising Above. I took the entire first chapter out, which was Everyone Has a Story, where I talk about my childhood. I took that out. I took the last chapter out, What About God? And I just made it a book about, it was like a big brother talking to a younger sibling, trying to teach them from the lessons that he's learned through the School of Hard Knocks. In fact, in the new book I have a PhD from the School of Hard Knocks. And I'm going to give you some advice. You can listen to it or not. So I made it more general and more about the reader, not about me, which I never wanted to be about me anyway, the Rising Above. I just put that in there because as I'm writing it, some people go, you know, you would really help a lot of people by giving some of your story because so many people think they're the only ones that struggle with this, and this. So that's how that came to be.
Thank you. Just FYI, the association flag behind you is kind of falling down again a little bit, sir. So while Master Robinson's working on that, I'll be looking through your comments a little bit here to see. Wow, there's a lot of different comments out here. I'll try to get to as many of these as I can in addition to the questions I have prepared for Master Robinson.
Fire away. I'm still able to talk.
All right, yes, sir. So going along with the book, I know you've already talked about kind of rewriting and writing kind of multiple books at the same time. Master Homecheck asked, "Is there another book on the way that we can expect?"
I'm actually currently writing 2 more books. Don't know if I'm going to publish them. I write because for me, it's a way to get all the stuff that I have in my head out. Um, I'm a consummate student. I'm always studying. I've been studying nutrition for 20 years. I've been studying alternative medicine and holistic medicine for 15. Um, Now I'm really big into studying the mind and the subconscious. After I wrote Rising Above, I discovered Dr. Bruce Lipton and Dr. Joe Dispenza and their ideas and theories on the mind and how most of us function. Well, not most of all of us function. 95% of our daily life, we're functioning in our subconscious mind, not our conscious mind. So most of the stuff that we're thinking about and dwelling on is past programming. And that's the stuff I'm working on now. It's pretty fascinating reading. I don't like to read. I've never been a reader. So when I read, I'm reading for knowledge. I don't read fiction. If I'm going to get involved in fiction, I'm going to watch a movie or a TV show. And I don't have TV, so it's a movie. There's nothing wrong with fiction. I read for knowledge. I met an elderly man when I was like 19, and he was talking about anything you want to learn, you can learn from a book. And he says, but you got to be careful what you read because not everything you read is true. So I'm always cross-referencing everything I read. And yeah, I'm an avid reader. I decided one day, and it's going to sound goofy, I wanted to be a walking, talking warehouse of knowledge. Whether I ever shared that knowledge or not, I wanted the information because you make your life better through information and good information. That's why I don't spend a lot of time on the internet because, you know, social media is what people, again, perspective and perception. I don't watch TV because it's perception and perspective. I don't watch the news because how do you know what to believe? I believe what I see, you know, and that's just people, you know, Grandmaster Shin and Master Beam told me a long time ago because I was always quiet. They both said to me, you're very quiet. You're an observer. And I'm like, yes, sir. And they're like, you keep doing that. He goes, because people will talk and people will do. He says, listen to their words, but then watch their actions. You know a man's heart and his integrity by his actions, not his words. And I've always held on to that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. A lot of great stuff so far, sir. I appreciate you sharing. So talking a little bit about your personal story, one thing that I wanted to talk to a little bit about, because I know it actually served as an inspiration to one of our own students here at Keystone that was kind of going through the same thing, was that you actually, some people may not know, but are a survivor of a brain tumor. Can you talk a little bit maybe about kind of what that challenge presented to you and how you worked through to keep moving on through your Tongue Sudo training?
Yeah. That's a hard one still to talk about. You know, my whole life I've been a health nut. You know, I've always exercised since I was a kid. I've always eaten relatively healthy. I do have my junk food periods, especially if I'm traveling. If I got to drive a long distance, I'm eating junk, not because I want it, but because I'm bored. But I was jogging one day, and when I got done, I was walking and I looked up. It was a beautiful sunny day. I looked up and the sky turned green. And I'm like, well, that's really weird. The sky's green. So I didn't think anything of it. And I thought maybe I was just hyperventilating or something. Who knows? So a couple weeks later at 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up out of a sound sleep with the most excruciating pain I've ever had in my life. It was like someone took a hot sword and shoved it from the top of my head through my, all the way down through my mouth. The pain was so intense I couldn't scream. I didn't know what to do. So I sat up in bed and it felt like it was an hour. It was probably 30 seconds. I don't know. All I know, I was in so much pain and I couldn't scream. So I took my fists and I punched myself both sides of my head to try to get a pain I could identify. And when the pain stopped, I was soaking wet. So I went downstairs and I paced the rest of the night. Next morning, I called the doctor and said, "Hey, something going on here. I think I need to come in." And the doctor's like, Kevin, you're such a healthy guy, but you get the weirdest stuff. Let's bring you in. Let's do an MRI because a guy, right up the street, just died of a brain aneurysm. I don't think that's what it is, but let's. So I was like, okay. Now you have to understand. 3 years before this happened to me, I had a friend from my church die from brain cancer, a young man. 6 months before this happened to me, another lady from my church was diagnosed with a highly aggressive brain tumor. And a teenager that lived 4 blocks from me was diagnosed with a highly aggressive brain tumor. So I'm freaking out. So I go to the doctor, they do the MRI. This was like 3 weeks later. I hadn't had another symptom. And they do the MRI. I go home. I get home, and my wife says to me, "You need to call the doctor." I'm like, "All right." So I call the doctor. Doctor says, "You need to get in your car and go down to Geisinger. There's a surgeon waiting to see you." I'm like, "What's going on?" They said, "You have a brain tumor." So I was taking my daughter to a movie, and she was 10. So I said, "Honey, I'll take you to the movie after I come back from the doctor." So I go down, and he says, "You have a brain tumor. It doesn't look like much. Don't worry about it." And I said, "Well, I just started nursing school. I don't really want to stop. If it doesn't look like much, can I wait till after this semester's over?" And he's like, "Sure." So I drive home to get my daughter, take her to the movie. I get home, I walk in the door, and here's the doctor on the phone going, "We're going to operate on you Wednesday." I'm like, "Wait, I thought this wasn't a big deal." He goes, "It's not, but we're going to operate on you Wednesday." So I had to drop out of nursing school. Now, this was a week and a half after 9/11. So I have all this stuff going on in my head. My friend died from brain cancer. I have two, a lady from my church has brain cancer. Kid across the street. I've got this going on. So I go in that morning for the surgery, and I'm waiting in the pre-op, and they've got the TV on, and it's all the news about. I said to the guy, "Can you put on some cartoons?" So I changed it and put on cartoons. And I'm supposed to be in a certain time. I wait in there an hour and a half because the guy in front of me had complications. Long story short, everything came out okay. But I was operating on a Wednesday, and they told me I'd be in the hospital, I don't know, 5 days, and I couldn't go back to my studio for a month. I said, okay. So I was operating on Wednesday. Friday came and I said, "Is there any reason why I can't go home?" And they're like, "Well, we'd like you to stay here just for observation." I said, "Okay, you took the thing out of my head. I've got 19 staples. Is there any reason why I can't go home?" They're like, "No." I said, "I want to go home." So they discharged me and I went home. So I called the doctor later that night and I said, "Hey, when can I start working out?" He goes, "You can't work out for 2 months." I said, "Can I go for a walk?" He's like, "Sure." So Monday morning, I went for a 5-mile walk. That Wednesday, so I had dropping on Wednesday. The following Monday, I walked 5 miles. And that Wednesday, I was in my studio teaching with a bandana on and a 5-gallon bucket because I was so nauseated, and my vision was screwy. So I figured if I was going to die, I wanted to die doing what I love. And I love teaching, so I was there teaching. And yeah, I mean, again, Tom Sado saved my life. When the pathology report came back, the doctor's like, "Well, it wasn't what I thought. I thought it was going to be totally benign." And, he says it's actually a low-grade cancer, but it's such a low grade, we're not going to worry about it. You don't need any therapy or treatment. We're just going to monitor you, every 6 months and then once a year. So, and that's what it's been. So I actually haven't had an MRI now in 5 years. So I just, again, I focus on Tom Sado. It's what I love. I try not to think about it. I think about, and since this happened, I've had 3 friends die from brain cancer. Samantha Gonski, one of my students, And another friend, and I have people like yourself who get students that have brain tumors and like, can you talk to them? And I'm like, sure. I don't know what I'm going to say. What I do say to them is, look, I know you're scared. You should be scared. I'm scared. Don't panic. Wait to see what it is. And then from there, you make your decisions and your choices. And even after it's over, every time you get a headache, every time you feel dizzy, you're going to instantly think, is that tumor back? That is normal. Fight through it. And that's all I can say to them, and encourage them, pray with them, tell them I'm thinking about them. There's really nothing you can say when someone's got a brain tumor or worse, brain cancer.
So,
It's like any cancer. It's just, it's crazy. But yeah, I hope I answered the question. I don't know. I get too emotional with that thing. I kind of rant. I apologize.
you absolutely answered the question, sir, and I appreciate that. I know it's probably in some ways hard to try to go back and relive through that, but I appreciate
Yeah.
you sharing the story. I think it helps for a lot of people that maybe gone through something similar or just have other difficulties in their life. So I appreciate
Yeah.
the story, sir.
Yeah. Don't focus on your difficulties. Focus on what you love. And the difficulties, they're there, but you don't make them the focus, because if you make them the focus, you give them more power. For me, I just wanted to get back in that studio and teach because that's where my power was.
Yes, sir.
Tom Sado was my power. I've had 11 surgeries. I've only taken one painkiller in my life. That's it. I don't do painkillers. Doctors are like, how can you not be taking anything? I said, don't need it. Because I don't focus on it.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Uh, just a lot of comments out there. Again, I apologize. I won't get to all of you, but here's one that's popping up on me. So it says, in the old times, people would often learn one, maybe two hyungs and master those for their entire martial arts life. If you had to pick one hyung to train and master or teach others, which one would that be?
Oh, you're killing me. I love all hyungs. I think they are the most beautiful thing on the planet. Um, when you see someone do a hyung with the right rhythm and the speed and the power and really beautiful technique, there is nothing more attractive than a form done well. And this sounds goofy, but I've said to people, if you could take, there's nothing more beautiful. I don't care, and no offense to any fashion model, I don't care how beautiful she is. You take a form and you do it with speed, power, rhythm, timing. You're not rushing it. There's nothing more. Oh my gosh, the energy that it gives off, the beauty that it gives off. It's amazing. And it's real. There's no makeup, there's no lighting, there's no airbrushing. It's awesome. I know that sounds crazy. To answer the question, if I had to pick any form, Young, I don't know I could pick one. I love them all. I can tell you what one I wouldn't teach, I wouldn't do a lot of, and no offense, Gento. I just do not like Gento. And I'll tell you why. When my hips were really bad, those stances with that front, that killed me. And I've never really liked it since then. I don't hate it, but of all the forms, that's my least favorite.
Yes, sir. Thank you again. Appreciate. You can see, why I like to interview Master Robinson. You can see the passion and the drive there, just talking about him, let alone anything else. So,
oh, I love them. I love them.
So, going back to talk about your travels, we have a question. Do you speak any other languages to help you better communicate in your world travels?
Actually, I'm working on one now. I'm not talking about it till I get it down a little bit better. I think people will be surprised when one day I start speaking in this language, because I've been studying now for a year and a half on and off, and I'm not good enough yet to say that I speak another language. I had a student that was deaf, and I learned just enough sign language that we use it for martial arts. So I don't know American Sign, but we have martial arts sign that this student and I did together. But no, I don't. I'm working on another language right now.
Yes, sir. Fair enough. Another question from Master Marco in Sweden. What would you say is the most memorable martial art experience you've had so far?
I've had so many great experiences. I couldn't pick one, Master Marco. Um, I'll tell you one of my favorite experiences was coming to Sweden and seeing you and Master Ewing and spending time with you guys. That was very memorable. I can't pick one because most of the memorable martial arts experiences I've had nothing to do with me. It was being happy for someone else and watching someone else, like seeing Master Fisher win, the World Cup twice. That was a memorable moment for me, and it had nothing to do with me. I was glad to see that. Um, Seeing Master Rob Massaroni win 3 regional cups, huge. These are things that mean a lot to me. So those are very memorable moments.
Yes, sir. Don't know specifically what he's mentioning, but you have a comment from Drew Hobbs here, sir. He says, "Can you tell a story of the crazy Master Robinson from the 80s and 90s?"
I don't think anybody's interested. It's funny because I had a student come up to me the other day. I saw, and he's like, "Oh, Master Hobbs was telling us about crazy Master Robinson." So yeah, I've had 11 surgeries, and I'm a super healthy guy. But the reason why I've had 11 surgeries is when I was younger, I wasn't real smart in the way I trained. I trained 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, for years and years and years. And I pushed myself till I either almost passed out or threw up. I love to train that way. Not smart, you wear your body parts out. I think one of my craziest trainings was I would go to karate. When I trained in high school, and I would take the children's class, which was an hour and a half. And then back in those days, the adult class was 2.5 hours. So I was training, a lot. And after class, I punch and kick the heavy bag. But sometimes, at least twice a week, I would go to the football field, which was behind my house. And I would do duck walks from goalpost to goalpost, and then turn around and do frog jumps from goalpost to goalpost. And then people wonder why my hips were out. Well, you can't do stuff like that. That's excessive. But at that time in my life, I was doing flying side kicks over 6 people, and they weren't kneeling on the ground. They were standing up and just bending at the waist. So I had really good legs then. But those are some of my crazy stuff. But we won't talk about some of the other stuff that I did. That was just really, it wasn't crazy. It was stupid, but I had a good time. I just love to train.
Yes, sir. Just a FYI, the flag's kind of down again. I don't know if you want to check on that or not.
I'm just going to have to take it down.
Yes, sir. I know respecting the flag is an issue, so I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, I'm just going to take it down.
So talking about your training, outside of Tang Soo Do, do you have any other specific training in other martial arts?
Yeah, so in 1988 at the Region 8 instructors class, Grandmaster Shin told us, by the time you're a 2nd degree black belt, you have your roots. Go out and study other systems, come back and share, and maybe we can improve our Tang Soo Do. Well, man, when he said that, I was all over it. So I got into boxing. I boxed for 2 years. I studied Hapkido off and on for 15 years, studied judo, eskrima, arnis, kali, small circle jiu-jitsu, V-arnis jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, little bits of everything. And what I did is when I went to study with these people, I said to them, look, I do not want rank in your system. I just want to learn the essence of what you do to improve what I do in Tang Soo Do, but to also make me more effective on the street. Some people were very generous and said, well, this is what we're all about. Other people were like, well, no, we want you to, like my judo teacher was great. I mean, he was phenomenal. But after like 4 months, when he realized to get rank in judo, you have to compete. Well, I didn't want rank anyway. He's like, Kevin, I want you to compete. I said, I don't want to compete. I don't want rank. I just want to train. Well, then he decided every class he was going to choke me out. And, after like the fifth class of him choking me unconscious, because, he felt the need to do that, I was like, okay, I'm done. I got the essence of what I needed out of that. I would have liked to stay, but you can't leave with headaches because someone's pressing on your carotid artery all the time. So, but like Professor Wally J was very generous with his information. A lot of the Hapkido people were very generous. The Arnis people gave me a different perspective. Yeah, I've trained in a lot of different systems, but I only have rank in Tong Soo Do and Hapkido. I refused rank in other systems because I didn't want to feel obligated to them. Well, now you've got rank, we want you to teach our system. And I told them, I'm World Tong Soo Do. I'll always be World Tong Soo Do. That's my roots. I'll never leave it. I just want to enhance it. So, yeah, I've trained in a bunch of different systems.
Sure, thank you. So talking a little bit about the self-defense side of things, it's something you've always kind of been passionate about, talked about, written about. Can you talk a little bit about, maybe you have mentioned a little bit, but a little bit more about your perspective on, what self-defense means and kind of how you approach that, maybe differently with, or the same with children and adults in your classes?
Yeah, my philosophy on self-defense is you avoid physical conflict at all costs. I mean, I don't care what someone calls me. I don't care, how you insult me. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to try to de-escalate. I'm going to avoid conflict at all costs. That's why when you see people getting rowdy, I usually leave the room. I try to always control my ego. I don't really have a temper. But if you put your hands on me after you've been threatening me, I'm going to do what I have to do. And I'm not going to think twice about it. You can't in today's world. Attacks are so random and so violent, and people have no conscience. So my approach to self-defense is I look for peace in all things, but once you put your hands on me, I'm going to destroy the evil of your attack one way or the other. One of us is going to get hurt, and it's not going to be me. And that's just how I look at it. Do I want to hurt somebody? Never. But will I? If you take that option off the table, absolutely. And I teach the children, how to avoid conflict. But if someone's hurting you, we teach the children the same as we teach the adults. Now, we teach the children when dealing with children, we teach them very gentle things. But, if they're attacked by an adult, we don't play. We tell them, poke them in the eyes, repeatedly, bite, kick them in the knees, kick them in the groin, never stop yelling, never stop. You just keep going until somebody comes. And the main thing with children, the main self-defense we teach them is when you're out, you stay with the group. You stay with your parent. You don't wander off. That will help you more than anything. Teenagers, stop arguing over stupid stuff and get off social media. Just because someone calls you a name doesn't make it true. Who cares what they think? You know you. But that's where, we get into the ego and the struggle with our mind, because so many people, if we're being honest, are so insecure and have such they just don't like themselves, low self-esteem and lack of self-worth. So that when somebody says something to them, it reinforces it in their brain and they take it to heart. And you got to learn to let that stuff go. So we have to constantly be reprogramming our brains.
Yes, sir.
I hope that answered your question.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Appreciate that. So again, going back a little bit, you talked about earlier how you had to leave nursing school, but I know you have worked in the medical field as a nurse, and mentions on your website as a psychotherapist as well. I'm not sure I knew that, but can you talk a little bit about that side of your profession and maybe how it influenced Tong Soo Do, or how Tong Soo Do may have influenced your professions one way or the other?
Sure. Well, I went back to nursing school a year after my brain tumor came out, so I finished that. Everything I've done in my life was truly just to enhance my Tong Soo Do. When I was in college, I was studying criminology and psychology. I got a 2-year degree. Again, I didn't really like school, but I was on the dean's list every semester. My passion's always been martial arts, but I had been told my whole life, you could never make a living teaching martial arts in Tunkhannock. It's not going to happen. So, you know, I got a career. I walked into a job as a psychotherapist because nobody else wanted the job, because it was a pretty low paying job, but the benefits were great. And I had experience with mental illness, you know, between my uncle. I had an uncle that was schizophrenic, and my mom has some issues. So, you know, I was very comfortable talking to people that were, you know, and I learned a lot. I was trained by two really good doctors and psychotherapists, and I learned tons and I read tons. So that helped me a lot with understanding myself and my ego and how not to get riled up with things, which I'm still learning a lot. The nursing, actually, I was really getting into, I've always studied the body and anatomy and all this stuff. But I thought, man, if I'm really going to do this, I'm going to have to force myself. And I just couldn't force myself. If I go to nursing school, it's going to force me to study all this stuff. So I did. I went to nursing school just so I could study in more depth how the systems of the body work and how they work together. And now, how can I disrupt those in a self-defense scenario? So it was actually to enhance my martial arts. But, you know, I did nursing for 10 years, loved it. But again, my passion is martial arts. And I was like, you know what? I can make a living doing martial arts full time. And I got to stop believing lies. And I did. And I stopped believing lies. And I've been making a living teaching martial arts full time since 2013.
Yes, sir.
Because I always worked a full-time job and ran my studio every night. My daughter is going to be 30 at the end of June. She can count on two hands how many nights I was home for dinner. I'm not proud of that. I was at my studio every night. But, you know, I don't know why. I just always felt obligated to the students and obligated to the art of Tong Soo Do to be the one to teach it and share it and do it with passion.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your time, sir. I have a few more questions for you that I've kind of been asking all the masters, but again, if you have some other comments for Master Robinson, please put them out there and we'll get them to him as well. So a couple more questions that I have that I've kind of been asking everybody. I know martial arts is your passion. You've mentioned that several times, but just as a person, is there any interest or hobbies you have kind of outside the martial arts maybe that people don't know about, or something you would like to share with the group about yourself?
Actually, that's the one thing I'm learning now is my whole life's been consumed with martial arts training and martial arts studying. You know, I used to read a lot of martial arts history. It's always been martial arts, martial arts, martial arts. That's all I knew. I study a lot. I'm studying a lot of things, varying things. That would be my hobby. I study 3 hours a day on something. I roller skate. I used to roller skate all the time. Actual hobbies, probably studying and training. That's it.
Sure.
I know I use the word I'm very passionate, but I hope it comes through when you see me train and when you see me teach. I just love what I do.
Yes, sir.
And I hope it comes out, not just in my words, but in my behaviors, you know? I'm a guy. I'm very quiet most of the time, unless you get me on a subject that I love. You know, people misread that because I don't smile a lot. I'm always in my head thinking and watching, and I don't talk a lot. So people think, well, he's kind of standoffish and he's kind of intimidating. No, I love everybody. It's just I got to process stuff. So
yes, sir. I think that's a theme that's come out in a number of interviews. I talked about that with Master Merrill and some other masters as well. That absolutely, as long as it's the right time and the right situation, the masters are approachable. Don't be intimidated. Don't say hi, strike up a conversation.
Yeah, we're just like everybody else.
So, so another one that some people have found difficult to answer and some people have found easier is I've been asking everybody, especially those with a lot of experience in the martial arts, kind of, have you seen any changes over the years, either for the positive or the negative in the martial arts in general, and maybe even in the association specifically? I know that's a tough question to answer.
Changes. Yeah, there's a lot of changes. Holy cow. Well, Region 8 instructor class, when that class started with Grandmaster Shin in '86, It was from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5 or 6 in the evening. No lunch, no water breaks. You trained all that time. And then over time, he shortened it up, and then we had meetings with food. We trained, and then we'd have the official food of World Tong Soo Do, hoagies and pizza. I always said to him, "Sir, we're training, we're getting in shape, and then we have hoagies and pizza." I don't get it, but I digress. Black belt tests. When I took my first degree black belt test, again, masters weren't in uniform. They were wearing whatever they wanted to wear. And very unprofessional back then as far as clothing. The test went all day. Like, we were on the floor at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you would do line drills for an hour. And then they would sit you down and bring up the next group. And then you'd be sitting there getting cold and tight. And then they'd bring you back up to see your forms and your weapons. And then you'd sit down. And then they'd bring you back up an hour later to see your one steps. And it was just like, oh my gosh, please. So you were really sore and achy. Our black belt tests are so much more efficient. The organization of the organization is so much better. I mean, Master Nicole Peterman has tournaments down to a science. They're run so efficiently. Master Scott Merrill and his security, down to a science. I could go on. Probably the best thing that's happened recently for the association is the creation of the vice president of operations, because now you've got someone in there who's going to just focus on how can we make this organization streamline and run better. It's easy to hide things when there's no organization. And you got Master Frank Vittori in that position, who's a consummate professional. I mean, he's a manager at a hospital. He doesn't do things on a personal level. He does it on a professional level. And you can't take things personally in any kind of leadership position. It's got to be what's best for the masses. And that's how I run my studio. That's how I teach. I don't care about what's best for me. I don't care what's best for my studio or Region 8. What's best for the association? When I'm in my studio, I'm going to do what's best for my studio and the association. When I'm in Region 8, I'm going to do what's best for Region 8 and the association. But we're a big group. We have to do what's best for everyone. The other thing that's changed is the women. I will go on record, and I will defend this anywhere in the world. World Tong Soo Do has the most outstanding group of female martial artists, hands down, on the planet. And it wasn't always that way. We had a very small number of women. Now the women are like, not only are there a lot of them, but they're phenomenal technicians. They're extremely knowledgeable. They're willing to serve. They're extremely humble. They're extremely helpful. I mean, in my travels, I've seen so many organizations that have like 10 or 15 really phenomenal female practitioners. Man, World Tong Soo Do has a huge number. And I wish I could name them all. I mean, the overall, the girls and the women in this association, I would put up against most of the men in technique, speed, power, knowledge, just attitude. It's just, I can't say enough about how much this organization has changed for the better because, one, the women, two, the willingness of people to serve out of a sincerity, not because they want power or position, but because they truly want to help the members. You just don't see that other places. And originally in the association, you could see all the politics, people jockeying, well, I'm going to do this because later down the road, it's going to mean this. You don't really see that much anymore. There's a little bit of that still, but it's not like it was. The association's gotten better, and I think it's going to keep getting better and better as long as we keep the focus on the association and not on individuals. Yes, because individuals are going to come and go. We're all going to pass away. But what did we leave behind? Did we teach well? Did we share our knowledge, our insight, our wisdom, our humility, and the passion to serve and love each other? I hope that's what we handed down. Because that's all, in the end of the day, that's all that matters. Did we love each other sincerely enough to change our life for the better and work on ourselves? and to change other people's lives with the magic and the beauty of what we do. It's subtle. It happens organically, and that's how it should be.
Sir. A few more questions from Facebook. I only have one more specific question for you, and then kind of an open-ended
Sure.
finish. This one kind of segues into what you were just talking about. So I have a question here saying kind of what do you see, or how do you see the World Tongue Sudo Association in the future, say 20 years from now, if you could predict what it would look like?
I can't predict that. I'm learning through all my studying to stay in the present moment, to think about the future. But I think if this group of masters we have now stay united and work together and put egos aside and politics aside and personal issues aside, the World Tongue Sudo can go on forever, because you got to do it with a attitude of unity, truth, and love. Our number one tenet is integrity. Integrity is a word that means what it means. We can't lie, we can't cheat, we can't steal, we can't take shortcuts. We got to love each other enough to sometimes pull each other aside and say, hey, you're going down the wrong road here, and this is why. And if someone doesn't listen, there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. We've got to be transparent. We are not the government, nor should we act like the government. We should be totally transparent on everything. So I see World Tongue Sudo. I mean, you see organizations all the time. The Grand Master passes away and they splinter into all these little factions. I can name associations that happened to. We're strong. I mean, for crying out loud, we lost Grandmaster Shin. Grandmaster Boblin wasn't quite ready, but he grew into the role and did a fantastic job. And man, what an impact he made and how he changed things. And now we got Grandmaster Strong. But all of us could be gone tomorrow. We have to work together and do it honestly. Don't say one thing to somebody's face and then say something else behind their back. That's not cool. What you say to their face, say what to say behind their back, tell them to their face. You got to do that. And it's not always easy. The truth isn't always nice, but if you speak it in love, it's still the truth. And doing what's right isn't always popular. And doing what's popular isn't always right. So that's where I see the association. That's just my goofiness on it.
Oh,
to me, it's about integrity. And, we call ourselves masters. Well, what does that mean? We've got to master our behavior. We got to master our mouths. We got to master our attitudes. And it's a constant process. We're going to fail. But when you fail, admit you failed, apologize, try to make it better. And that's where it's at. We live in a glass bubble. I tell everybody, we live in a fish tank. That's how I live my life. People are watching me all the time. Nothing against anybody else, but that's the reason I don't drink. I don't do a lot of goofy stuff. I don't eat crazy things and because I've got children watching. I've got adults watching. I've got people, there's nothing wrong with alcohol. I don't drink because, one, I don't like it, but two, what if someone sees me drink and then they start to drink and then before you know it, they can't control it? Well, subconsciously, for me, they saw me do it, so I thought I was okay. They could handle it. They couldn't. So that's what I don't want to ever lead somebody down the wrong road, if that makes any sense.
Yes, sir.
No, I'm certainly not judging anybody, but I think a master should be a role model. And I don't want to use the word hero because that sounds pompous. A master should be a role model and an example of how people should live their lives, a life of integrity. Doesn't mean they're going to do it right all the time, because heaven knows we're not going to do it right all the time, but we should be trying. That's why you should stay in shape. That's why you should, be positive. That's why you should be friendly. There is nothing more depressing. I went to a Hall of Fame one time, and 3 people I looked up to in the martial arts were there. And, I was walking by, and it was, all they were doing was dropping F-bomb after F-bomb and talking about the fights they were in and hitting on these women. And 2 of them were married. And I'm like, you just completely destroyed what I thought you were, because you talk a good game, but you're not. And I'm not judging, but for me, That's how we should be living the right way and setting the example for, because life is hard. Life shouldn't be easy. Let's, make our lives hard. Let's do the right thing.
Wow,
I'm
awesome.
off my soapbox. I'm sorry.
No, no, sir. I love it. Like you said in the very beginning of that answer to that question, it all goes back to integrity, and I think you definitely have embodied that for me and a lot of other people, and you are a role model to us in the association. So appreciate you talking about it.
I appreciate that. I'm not perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Um, one more question that it may be difficult to answer or not. It shouldn't be something that's difficult to talk about, but there's a person out there asking, could you talk a little bit more? You had mentioned your chapter that maybe you had taken out of your book, What About God? So can you talk about that, your perspective a little bit?
Yeah, we live in a time where everybody, it's not cool to mention God, and people are confused on what God's all about. And, is there a God? Isn't there a God? It's not my place to tell people if there is or isn't. The Bible says God calls you to himself. But I just talked about my struggles. I was raised in a non-Christian home. I was a devout atheist. The only time I ever heard God's name was when my father was, yelling at me and carrying on. But I came to know God when I was in college because I knew that I was a really broken person and I wanted peace. And it didn't come easy. And when I became a Christian, it still was not easy. I still have a lot. To this day, I have questions, and and it's okay to question. It's a hard subject to discuss with people, and I don't want to get on the pulpit with any of this. I myself am a Christian. I have friends, very close friends that are atheists. I have close friends that are Muslims. I have close friends that are Hindu. I don't judge anybody. The Bible tells me I am to love. That is the hardest thing, if we're being honest, to love, especially for someone who was raised in a home where there was no love. Love is not an emotion. There's a form of love that's an emotion, but love is an act. It's a deliberate act. You choose to love or not to love. And that's something I'm working on every day. Do I do it well? No. Am I trying? Yes. Loving unconditionally is hard. When someone hurts you, my thing, if someone hurts me, I want to retreat. I don't want to deal with them anymore. That's not love. That's conditional love. I got to let, So yeah, I don't want to get into the whole thing. You can read the book, you do your own research. I don't want to get into a whole theological dissertation of God, because I believe there's more that we don't know about him than we do, because God is God. He's infinite and we're not. So yeah.
Yes, sir.
I hope that helped that person a little bit. If they want to, we can talk sometime face to face. And I that's something I don't mind talking about. I've done a lot of study. I still study,
Going back medically, you had mentioned some problems with your hips over the years, and somebody had asked specifically how you train through that as a benefit for their own personal training right now.
Well, fortunately for me, I'm not a very bright guy in a lot of ways when it comes to training. I actually hurt my hips. My original hip injury was when I was 12. I was dared to jump out of the top of a barn, and I did. And I didn't jump into a pile of hay. I jumped onto a barn floor from the top of a barn. And of course, it drives your knees in. And I had a serious hip injury then. Martial arts probably extended but I trained for years not knowing I was bone on bone. And I had these huge bone spurs. It wasn't until Grandmaster Shin gave me the ultimate compliment and then publicly embarrassed me at the same time that I went to the doctor and realized, my hips were completely shot. Had my hips replaced. A lot of the times what happens is, as martial artists, is in our enthusiasm to train, we're not wise. I was 125 pounds in high school, and we had a 100-pound bag in the studio, and I was kicking that thing all the time. Well, where's that energy going to go? You kick that heavy bag, that energy is going to reverberate back up. It's going to go right up into your hip and into your knees. And every once in a while, we'd swing the bag, and we would try to stop it with a kick. And I would do that hundreds of times, plus the duck walks, the frog jumps, and I already had an injury. So what happened is my glutes stopped working, and my legs and my hips took all the shock. So the stuff I study now is how to get people to understand to activate their glutes so that they're not using their hamstrings and their quadriceps and putting undue stress on their hips and their knees. So that's, since my hip replacements, that's what I'm studying now. And you could ask my students, the last 2 years, we're doing a lot more glute activation to, one, make their kicks stronger and to make them more flexible, but to get rid of the hip pain. There's tons of information. A lot of hip pain is because of weak glutes. If you've got pain in the front of your hip, it could be because your psoas is tight, or it could be because your hamstrings, your quads, and are tight, but your glute med might be too weak, and it's forcing your psoas to tighten. So you always got to work that glute med to take the pressure off the psoas. And you always got to work the glutes to take the pressure off the hamstrings and the knees and the ankles. It's all, it's called the kinetic chain. The ankles, the knees, the hips, they're all connected. And, that's the other thing that's different between today's martial arts and when I started. Back in the day, martial arts, very military, it was just hardcore, train. You won't all be black belts. We only want the strongest, blah, blah, blah. Today, it's more of a scientific approach if you have a good instructor. And if you don't have an instructor that's going from a scientific approach, you need to find someone that can help you. Don't get rid of your instructor, but I do a lot of research into how to keep my students from getting the injuries that I have. Because all my injuries came from stupidity and overtraining. Train hard, but you got to give your body rest. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, sir. I think a lot of us have experienced something similar over the years, and I agree that, especially when we're younger and just want to go, that we don't train smart. So
yeah, and it comes back to bite you in the butt. All my surgeries, except for my brain surgery, came from overuse and just abusing my body, thinking I was making it stronger. I think of Master Kim that passed away. He used to eat metal shavings, thinking he was going to make his body like iron. He destroyed his heart because of the metal shavings. And I'm thinking, I remember my one instructor saying, you constantly hit the heavy bag and you pound on the concrete and you do this and you do that, and it makes your bones thicker and stronger. Now it doesn't. It destroys your bones. It destroys your ligaments. It destroys the tendons and the cartilage. And yeah, so we train smarter now. Our students should never have the injuries we have, ever.
Right. So and this is my final specific question, but we live in an era now in the association where a lot of our students have never even met or really had a chance to know Grandmaster Shin. And as we move forward, a lot of people won't have a chance to have known Grandmaster Bodwin. So is there any story or experience you can share with the Grandmasters from your personal experience?
Yeah, Grandmaster Shin was, it's funny, I was with him my whole career. I started training directly under him in 1986 at the Region 8 instructor class sometimes. Back then we trained 11 months out of the year, 8 hours a day, no break. And then over time it was, 10 months out of the year. Now it's like, because, and it didn't matter if there was a tournament, if there was a black belt, you still had class. He didn't care. And, I spent all that time with him, but him and I were close, but we weren't close. I'm an introvert. I was always taught by my parents, you don't speak unless you're spoken to. You're to be seen and not heard. In the karate studios, when I started training in Tong Soo, you could talk outside of the studio. Once you walked through the doors, there was silence. You didn't speak unless you were spoken to. You could whisper in the locker room, but once you were on the training floor, there was no talking, there was no goofing around. And that's how I've always trained. I still do that today. And people misread that, but it's, Tong Soo is serious, got to be serious. So Grandmaster Shin, phenomenal teacher, great humanitarian. Two things about him that I'll carry with me my whole life was his sense of humor. We were traveling, we had a layover in Chicago one time, and him and I were sitting in the food court. And again, I didn't speak unless spoken to. And we got some Asian food, and he wouldn't let me order. He ordered my food, and I had to eat whatever he ordered. But we're sitting there, and these 5 guys come around the corner, and The one guy in the middle was to been an MMA fighter who had just had a match. He looked like he'd been through a meat grinder. His right eye was completely swollen shut. His left eye was slightly open, just all kinds of funky colors. His nose was cut. And, he had his guys with him, and two of them had on a Mr. T starter kit, all the jewelry in there. They had this certain strut. And Kwanzaa Nim Shin looks up and he goes, oh, maybe you should try some Tong Soo Do, learn how to kick, you do better. And he didn't whisper it. He said it in a normal voice. And the last guy in the entourage, his head kind of snapped, and he looked right at me. And I just kind of looked at him and I went, how you doing? And that was like, I'm going to get killed trying to, because these guys are going to get upset, and I'm going to get killed on the watch with Grandmaster Shin in Chicago in the airport. So that was one. The other one was, he paid me a compliment that I'll carry to my grave. And when I think about it, it's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me, but it also, on a lot of levels, hurt me. We were alone one time and we were talking. He said, Master Robinson, he never called me Kevin. He always called me Master Robinson. He says, I just want you to know you're one of my best. And that's all he said. And then months later, we were at a Region 8 instructor class, and he said it publicly. He talked about Master Godwin. And then he said, and then Master Robinson, one of the best of all time. He good at forms, he good at weapons, he good teacher, he good this, he good that. And then he says, but he get out of his car, he walk, he ooh, he ah, he hurt. He all busted up now. So he gave me the ultimate compliment. And then he's like, he's all busted up now, which was hysterical. It hurt me because I realized I went years not performing at my best because I had these hips that I just kept training in pain, not realizing I needed to have them replaced. So I felt like I let him down in that. So at that point, Grandmaster Bodwin, I did not know well until Grandmaster Shin passed. And in 2013, when we were in Germany together, he took time. It was right after his cancer surgery. And he took time, and him and I were alone for an hour and a half. And we just talked about World Tong Soo Do and about life and about his cancer diagnosis and his thoughts about it and how he just wanted to serve this association. And he started to cry. And I put my hand on his knee and I said, sir, I understand what you're going through. I said, when I had my brain tumor, all I kept thinking is I just want another day to serve and to train. And he put his hand on my leg and he says, Kev, that's all I needed to hear. And I said, you're going to be fine, sir. And every time we traveled, when we were in Argentina, when we were in the Netherlands together, he always made time for him and myself to sit down for at least an hour and talk about World Tong Soo Do, but about personal things and what we see and observe and how proud we were of like the Europeans, like Master Khan and Master Trogelman did a phenomenal job. You don't understand how good these people are till you go over to that country. And they're all phenomenal. They're phenomenal kickers. They're phenomenal at forms. They're phenomenal at weapons. And they're dead serious when their dobaks are on. But when those dobaks come off, they are the most fun-loving people who just love each other and want to have a good time. It's amazing. And we talked about that. And he always he never called me Master Robinson when it was just him and me. He would always call me Kev. And he would say, I am so glad that we get to have these talks and that we're brothers. And those things mean a lot because I can just imagine if this hurts me like this, I can't imagine what Master Valentin, who grew up with Grandmaster Bodwin and Master Dan Furley and Master Trogelman and all those people, Master Couture, all those people in Region 9 who grew up with this wonderful human being who was so knowledgeable, but more importantly, like Grandmaster Shin had a mystique because he's Asian and he was well known, but Grandmaster Bodwin had this humanity and vulnerability that takes such great strength to show. And yeah, I just want people to understand that a real master, male or female, doesn't matter, is a person of great strength and pride. But a real master is someone that will show you their heart, and they're not afraid to tell you the truth, and they're not afraid to be vulnerable, because that's when you're vulnerable, that shows real strength. And I got to where I was or am today, not because I'm a strong human being, but because I was a fragile, scared little boy who needed to be tough. And in the course of becoming tough, realized that being tough doesn't make you tough. What makes you tough is being vulnerable and being able to love other people no matter what. That's true toughness, because it's hard to love people sometimes, including yourself. You know, Grandmaster Shin and Grandmaster Bone and Grandmaster Strong and all the masters. I mean, Master Khan and I have had some very intimate private conversations where he took me aside and just talked to me. And I always thought Master Khan didn't like me because he's such a quiet guy. But we're all introverts in our own way. And we all just need to like, just let it go, you know? Master Kenny Purnell is another one. Master, I could go on and on. Master, I could go on and on. They're all so special in my heart. There is no one in World Tang Soo Do that I don't love and respect. There are some that I love more than others, but I love them all. And I respect them all on some level. And I can see where Grandmaster Shin and Grandmaster Bodwin like gave pieces of themselves to each of us. And I'm hoping that we're doing that for each other.
Sir.
You know, like you and I have had conversations before. You know, I've always told you, like, I've always admired your kicking. You know, it's fast, it's powerful, the technique is flawless. And I was like, man, if I could do that, you know, we've all got something, you know, it's just awesome. You know, I could go on and on about every master. You could name a master and I could tell you something about them that would just curl your hair. But so I hope I answered that question. I'm sorry I'm getting emotional. It's just like, you know, I don't talk a lot about some things because it just hurts.
Yes, sir.
When you grow up, and this has been my whole life, this is all I've known, it's all I've ever wanted to do. And you watch these people and you love these people, and your own fears and insecurities keep you from talking to them and getting to know them well. And then you get to know them and they're gone. It hurts. So people, you know, don't be afraid to talk to a master. Don't be afraid to talk to somebody, because when they're gone, you don't get that opportunity. And you're going to miss out on so many beautiful people and beautiful souls. So, yeah.
I appreciate all of that, sir. No, that's wonderful. And you've pretty much, you're living the example of what you're talking about. So I appreciate it. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to do these interviews, was to just make those connections, especially in this time we're in now, and share that information to people. Because someday none of us will be around, but hopefully we can leave something behind to share with others. So appreciate your time today, sir. I don't have much I can do to top what you've already said, but I'll just leave the last one kind of open-ended. If you have any closing comments, words of wisdom, advice, you still have, you know, approximately 40 people out there watching. So any final comments to anyone out there, sir, and we'll finish up.
My only comment is, you know, if you're going to do Tang Soo Do, don't do Tang Soo Do. Live it. Live it. Don't do it. Live it. Feel it. Enjoy it. When you train with a serious attitude, full speed, full power, proper attitude, positive. When you're off the floor and you're not training anymore, just make those connections. And I know it's hard. You know, I'm an introvert. I'm really, truly shy unless I'm talking about something I love. You're not going to find what we have anywhere else in the world. I mean, I don't even find it in church. There's something about this group of people that just touches me so deeply. I can't even explain it. Um, Enjoy it, do it with sincerity, and try not to ever stop because there's always so much more to learn. I know so little, and I've been doing it for 44 years. So that's all I've got. Nothing profound will ever come out of my mouth, but I'll give you little nuggets of information.
I wouldn't necessarily say that was true, sir. I think there was a lot of things that came out of your mouth today that I would call profound. So I appreciate your time. We're going to finish up. I'm just going to plug a couple other things real quick. Master Farrelly will be on later tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern with Master UTech. So try to catch that one if you're out there. And I will be scheduling an interview with Master Julia Harvey for Monday next week. So appreciate everybody who's been continuing to watch these, and appreciate Master Robinson's time. Thank you so much, sir. Have a great weekend.
You.
It was great to talk to you today. Tung Su.
Thank you, Tung Su.
Closing down our live stream.